And with that, I will hand things over to Tanya. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tanya Isa, and I'm a board member with the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance. Welcome, and thanks for spending part of your evening with us this evening. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, we are going to pause for our land acknowledgement. It is with gratitude and humility that we acknowledge that we are learning, speaking, and gathering on the ancestral homelands of the Mohican people, who are the indigenous people of this land. Despite tremendous hardship in being forced from here, today their community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Muncie community. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present, as we commit to building a more inclusive and equitable space for all. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. Dick Gibbs will be sharing his story of the restoration of the Dickinson Hill Fire Tower at Grafton Lake State Park. Dick left his early roots on the family farm in southeastern Minnesota to earn a chemical engineering degree at the University of Minnesota and a PhD from RPI. Following RPI, he worked for the New York State DEC for 35 years, developing and managing the Automotive Emissions Laboratory with a small group of scientists that worked on measuring and reducing emissions from cars, trucks, and buses. In retirement, Dick has focused on forest management through his efforts with the New York Forest Owners Association and on land conservation through involvement with the Rensselaer Plateau Alliance. He and his wife, Sherry, are founding members of the RPA, now retired board members, but still very active volunteers. Dick and Sherry have also demonstrated their conservation ethic by donating the development rights on their 150-acre farm to the Agricultural Stewardship Association through a conservation easement so as to preserve in perpetuity agricultural and forest land and open space in Rensselaer County. Living with type 1 diabetes for nearly 50 years, Dick has enjoyed years of recreational cycling with the Mohawk Hudson Cycling Club. He finds the hills of the Rensselaer Plateau to be challenging and, most importantly, to be cherished from the views at the top of the Dickinson Hill Fire Tower. Now, over to you, Dick.
Thank you, Tanya. It's with great pleasure that I come tonight to give you a little bit of the story of how we conserved and saved the Dickinson Hill Fire Tower. My hope for each of you, I know many of you have been up to the fire tower many times, but some may never have been there. My hope is that after the talk is over, you will decide to dedicate yourself to going for the nice hike up at Grafton Lake State Park and visit the tower and climb to the top. With that, let's get going. This is the fire tower on Dickinson Hill as it looked in 1932. You can see all of the X braces attached to the four legs going all the way up to the cabin. These fire towers were mostly built by the same company that built windmills all over the nation. And tonight we're going to look through all of these X braces and frames and pieces and make sure they're good to go for you and your kids and any other visitors. In the old days when fire towers were built, it was part of fire suppression and forest fire management. Now we're looking at a picture taken from the cabin of the fire tower, and you can see why we want to conserve these. The landscape and the view that you will get if you visit the tower, I call it life-changing. every time I visit the tower and go up inside and look, whether it's winter, spring, summer, fall, I am renewed. There is something that changes in me when I see a view such as this. So tonight we're going to work on making sure this view is conserved and available to each of you. How did that happen? In about 1905, the forest fires burned in the Adirondack Mountains of New York State and consumed millions of acres. You can't see it here, but it's all burned over. Why did that happen? Bad logging practices combined with steam trains that emitted sparks all through the Adirondacks. This is just a general map of the Adirondacks. You don't have to look at the details. The red areas were burned in 1905, I believe. So there was this huge need to take action, and New York State Conservation Department was authorized to build fire towers all over the state and stock them with observers who watched for endless times. And if they saw a fire, take appropriate action. The Dickinson Hill Fire Tower, which is the fire tower we'll talk about in great detail tonight, was first staffed by this person, Helen Ellett. Now, Helen Ellett is a national hero. If anybody wanted to make a movie about something, Helen Ellett would be it. She rode her horse 8 miles through the woods, no roads, every day to sit in the tower for like 24 hours. But Helen also understood that the fire tower, in addition to just being a fire suppression facility, was a place for people. And she welcomed kids and families who would find their way up to the tower, and she had flowers. If you go to the tower now, you might still see some of those flowers of hers still growing. She had a cabin up there that the state built for all fire people, and there is Helen with her horse, and then she would ride home when her tour of duty was done. So a lot of the reason this tower has been preserved rests on Helen, and we'll talk about her a little bit here and there through the talk. Here she is riding her horse, probably going home after a long shift with her dog, and this was in the late 40s, early 50s. I first met Helen when I was coming up to the tower and expressed interest in how it could be saved. And Helen would say to me, "Dick, when are you going to save that tower? I'm not going to live that much longer. And I want this tower saved. And you're the guy to do it." So Helen Ellett is an original American item. She is it. And there's a book by Paul Lasky on all the fire towers of New York State. You can get that book. You probably could get it by tomorrow morning if you went online to Amazon. I don't know where it is. And here's Helen looking out with her binoculars out of the cabin. And there's a lot more about Helen if you are interested. And that is why the Dickinson Hill Fire Tower is on the National Historic List of Important Places. So we're going to go on in and work on this tower because it had fallen apart a lot. But a lot of the reason that we did this and that we could even do it relates to Helen Ellett. In the early 1980s, I had taken up mountain bicycling. This is a picture from one of those disposable cameras that you take and then you just throw it away and the picture's gone. I'm up in the cabin of the tower. And here along the bottom of the frame, looking down from the cabin, you can see some of the hardware that held the whole cabin together. And here you can see a few of our bicycles. I can't remember exactly who was on those rides. We were nuts for bicycling, and it was wonderful. We had so much fun. And one of the guys who I rode with a great amount was Ben Hill. Ben Hill worked in my lab group, and he also rode road bicycling with Sherry and I and a good number of others from the Mohawk Hudson Cycling Club. Then few of us took up mountain biking. Pretty soon we're riding mountain bikes up over rough trails and everywhere. It was like being a little kid cubed. It was so great. We came up to this tower and it was in bad repair, and I'll show you that next. Ben Hill was the legitimate get it done guy. He was that many times over. We looked and we said, you know, some people are talking about saving the tower. Different elected officials say it should be saved, blah, 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 nothing's happening. And Ben Hill and I stood right down here at the base of this tower, and we shook hands. And if you shook hands with Ben Hill, you were going to get a grip. And we said, let's save this thing. So that started it for me. Unfortunately, it wasn't too many years, a year or so after that, that Ben Hill passed. He had melanoma. What a loss. We'll talk about that a little bit more. This is what the base of the tower looked like. In the middle of the picture going up, you can see one of the four legs of the tower. The bolted X-brace pieces that you see, one on the left, one on the right, are the many X-braces that ladder their way up to the very cabin. You can see over here that rust has come through. I don't know if any of you like Neil Young, but he wrote the song, Rust Never Sleeps. It sure applied to the tower. When rust forms, it takes up more room than the bare metal and is chemically very powerful. And you can see the rust has expanded and actually split the metal. Our job is going to be to make the other side over here look like this, with a brand new piece, hot dip galvanized, with a grade 8 bolt. And that's what I'm going to show you how we did that. First, there was a lot of rubbish to clean up. The state police had an early radio system here that they had abandoned for a better one, and they never took the cement block building down that was sitting right beside the tower. So there was a huge amount of stuff to pick up. Here we are in October, and we have Jonas Morelli, Jim Grasso, and my beloved Joe Dalton. Joe, I know you're on this call. I am so happy you're here. Sharon and I love you dearly. And I'll say it again through this talk. Joe was involved with the restoration of this tower from the very beginning till it was all done. Joe, you are the guy. There was no electricity up here, and we had some work to do that I'll talk about next with these metal pieces. So we brought up a generator, made our own electricity, and went to work. First, here's the northwest view from the tower, and in the distance, poorly, you can see the Tom Hennick Reservoir. The Tom Hennick Reservoir had been established by the city of Troy as its water supply and was concerned that fires in this whole area would compromise their water supply. So hats off to the city of Troy. They kicked in some of the original money to put the tower up in 1924 when the tower first went up. Okay, it's in October of 2010. We have now established with the state police that we can work on the tower, but we don't have any supplies, money, or anything yet. So we'll talk about that some. First, we had to lug up stairs, these planks clear up to the top of the tower. And you can see that we're putting in new planks. And there's Joe Dalton's ski coat. I know it from many years. Joe, thank you. You were always there. Guardrails for safety were put up because the trap door up into the cabin was gone. And if you fell in there, you were going for a long fall. Bill Starr and Randy Neer did these safety rails. If you go there today, you're going to climb up the steps up here on the last ladder, step up into here, and you're going to be damn glad that there were these safety rails here. Oh, then we got started more because we had permission, and a tree had grown up right around the base of the thing. This is Gary Thoman. You'll know him, or you might know him more and more. Cut this tree down. We got that out. We got the cement blocks from the early radio shed. They're gone. The tree is gone. We're clearing up the site before we start working. Meanwhile, down at the Grafton Lake State Park, several of our people were taking the white oak lumber and making stair treads, drilling the holes in the stair treads, using a router to smooth off the rounded edge. And so there was a lot of off-site work that had to be done. Randy Neer and I can't remember exactly, but there was a lot of off-site work, and the lumber for all of our project was partially and almost totally donated by Gundrum Lumber of Grafton. Dear Gundrum Lumber, without you, we wouldn't have gotten this done, and it's a wonderful thing. Thank you again and again. First thing we had to do was climb up to the top of the tower and take every stair tread off. So we worked our way downward, tread by tread, cutting off the bolts, taking the old rotten, some of them split and everything. We had to remove all the stair treads. You can see here the stair treads, if I get my cursor, you can see the stair treads are all gone, all the way up the tower. So down here, there's a safety tape saying, don't go up here, you can't. There's no treads. Up here, you can see some of the leftover ironwork from the state police radio system. There was conduit, all had to be taken down and taken away to the dump. At the end of the day, these are the people who helped us take the stair treads off. There's Sherry, my wife. There's me on crutches. I just had knee surgery. And here's the indomitable Gary Thoman. I hope he's watching tonight, but you never know. And Ed Murphy. We four took all the stair treads off. Then we had to put landings on. And here's Sherry probably putting stain or sealer on some of the stair treads. You notice that the landings are made of individual boards, and then underneath is what you call a stringer that is put on from underneath, drilled up with a carriage bolt coming in from the top so you don't stub your toes or feet, and bolts all snugged in from underside. Then all of this is kind of mostly working like one solid piece. So the landings were quite a job because we had to carry those pieces up there. Fortunately, Gary Thoman had made a detailed map of every board on every landing and how long it needed to be and where it needed to be cut off or notched out to get around the iron that was in the way going on for each piece. So here's Charlie Kramer with a saber saw, and Fred DeMay, who was vice president of RPA for decades. Fred, I don't want to start crying. They told me when I had my accident, don't cry, Dick. You can cry, but don't blubber. So I'm not gonna blubber, but Fred DeMay is the man. He has done so much, and here Fred and Charlie are following Gary's detailed plan and making a board ready for the landing. Finally, we get our boards all ready for landings, and now we got to get up in here. Here's Gary Thoman, and he's got to have a drill, and he's got to know how to do everything. And we temporarily anchor the boards that he's standing on with C-clamps. You can see them right underneath them. But in addition to that, we had other people working down below, so everybody working had to be tied off in case they stumbled or fell. They wouldn't go all the way down 60 feet. And so here's, you can see the rope. Gary is a rock climber, and he brought his climbing gear. And every time we moved, he had to tie off. He also had to tie off his wrench, which was Charlie's long, 3-foot long torque wrench. So it was complicated. So we're putting the stringers underneath the landings, and there's Gary. You can see he's tied off for safety, and he's got the board that he's using is C-clamped for as a temporary place to work from. Now a little diversion, the other thing we had to do, the handrails going up all the stairs of the tower were put there for forest rangers, not for visitors or people coming with their little kids. So the handrails were not high enough to meet code. Thankfully, Kurt Kress, the engineer from Parks, and Elaine Chinney and Ball found some money, and we were able to get the extender pieces that we would have to install on every stairs all the way to the top. They weren't that long, and they weren't always drilled. We had to do that with our own generator. Here we are installing the extenders. If you see here, you can see there's a little extension. This is now like 18 inches higher than it was before. And that's Sherry up there. And I think it's Charlie. You can't see what his legs. No, this is Charlie over here, Charlie Kramer. And this is Joe Dalton handing me the tape measure. It was, if you ever worked for the state, anybody here from New York State knows that the fiscal year ends March 31st. So if you have money or were given money at the last minute by the people above you, you had to get the work done and hand in the voucher before May 31st. So it was, polite the French, but it was damn cold. It was probably 15 degrees out when we did the extension of all the handrails. Here we are. There's Gary in the purple pants. I think that's Charlie right there. And I can't say, it might be Bernard Cognan. And we're extending all of the handrails at this time. That's all the money we had. We got her done. Back down at the bottom, you can see the pack rust. We call this pack rust because it expands and breaks everything. Here you see the leg of the whole tower. We were lucky enough to have David Vanna from Bloomingtown in the Adirondacks. He's a professional fire tower restorer. And so we bought new X-braces, all built to the exact correct length before he got here, drilled with new holes, and hop dipped in galvanizing so that we didn't have a place for the pack rust to start. So here we go. We're installing X-braces. There's Bernard and there's Joe Dalton, and we're taking off nuts and bolts. There's Charlie. He was the one who had the 3-foot torque wrench and knew the exact specifications so that every bolt and nut we replaced on this whole project was torqued to the exact setting. We're trying to put in the first X-brace, and this gets complicated. I'll try to be quick, but there's some important things here. We established a yard arm so somebody could be roping up new pieces of X-brace, because each X-brace had a hole in the middle of it where it crossed the landing. So there was a hole convenient in the X-brace, and we would use a clip, and somebody running the rope would pull it up, kind of balanced, then we would catch it, and now we got to work on it. Here you can see piece of X-brace going up. And even though we're just a few feet off the ground, you have to have climbers. We had 4 guys in climbing gear. We were blessed on this project with people who knew how to work and get things done safely. And David Vanna and the people from where we bought the materials up in Bloomington, the Adirondacks, was the lead boss. He knew what needed to happen. Everybody else fit in, and we were safe, and we never had one accident. And we got a long ways to go. All right, we're getting halfway up the tower. Here's Gary. And you can see the future X-braces down here that we got to put in. So it's a long day because you got ropes and safety and people and all kinds of stuff. Now you see some ratchet strap right here laying on the ground. Why do we have that? Because when the X-brace passes where the landing is, you have to unattach the landing bolt and suspend the landing temporarily with ratchet straps, then get the X-brace up into position, get the holes lined up, then put the grade 8 bolts in and snug everything up. Here's Gary, he's getting closer to the top. And you can see down below, Sharon's got the food set out. Tell Gary it's time for food. And you can see the ratchet strap here that's used to temporarily support the landing that Gary is working with the nuts and bolts on. It's time for lunch. We had good food. Sherry, thank you again and again. You were in the middle of the tower. You stained all the steps. You did many things on the landings, and you helped with the transport of the iron up and down. Some of these angle lines were 22 feet long, and their weight is 30, 40, 50 pounds. So everything has to be done safely. We're back at work, lunch is over, and we're getting up into this part of the tower over here. And you can just see that it's getting pretty hot. At times we had 3 or 4 people in climbing gear hanging off the outside of the tower so that the X-braces could be transported up and the old X-braces transported down, and then the bolting had to be done, and then we would have to pick up the landing, and then when the frame was all bolted in, then we could take that off. Then we'd start again on the next one. Here we are, a little more detail. We can stop this, but it's a non-trivial to hold up the whole platform, line up the bolt in the middle of the new X-frame, tighten it all up, and get out of here. Here's Gary. He's tied off. You can see he's got his safety on. His wrench is hanging in the air because that's on a safety lanyard. And Gary, you're the best. Here's Sherry, and I think it's Charlie doing transportation, and that's an important job. We're getting up there now. We're getting near to the cabin floor. We're done. And the whole crew comes down, and I had forgotten it, but it was my birthday. They made me a cake, who somebody did. And that's David Vanna and Mark McIntosh. They were awesome. They led us, and we worked right with them, piece for piece. Now we're at the cabin floor. This up here is the cabin floor, and working on a tight spot up there where the frame of the tower meets the cabin floor is Greg Hallworth. 60 feet up, tied off. He's a good climber. He's really fit. Greg gets it done. He's good overhand, and we're getting the bolts in on the cabin floor. So I say life is a bucket of nuts and bolts, because it was so wise and of Kirk Kress of the Parks Office to require that we used fresh nuts and bolts so the threads were not pre-ruined by stretching too much. And that's what the end of the day looked like. You can see the shiny X bracelets all installed on all four sides. We had to go around and round the tower. Here you can see the shiny X bracelets. We're getting ready for the grand opening. Here's the grand opening. And we were really blessed at we had the state police there. They've been great throughout this whole thing. And park staff who have been awesome throughout. Here's Melissa Miller. She's now the park superintendent, but at that time, I don't think she was, but maybe she was. Maybe she was. But Melissa, I hope you're watching tonight. You've been such a supporter throughout this project. We were lucky at the grand opening to have Kathy Jimeno, the Rensselaer County executive. And I hope, Kathy, you are watching or picks this up later. You have been so amazing throughout several projects that I've been involved with. You get it, that these things are important. Here's Helen Ellett. We got it done before she passed. She was so great and so happy that we got this done. And what a iron horse woman she was throughout everything. Here's Ruth Hill, Ben Hill's mother, Ben being the guy that was in my car testing group and made the handshake agreement that we would get this saved, and of course didn't live to see this, but Ruth came. And the Hill family donated a considerable donation to a special fund we established in the Friends of Grafton to get the tower done. You can see the new ribbon, you can see up. Here's a whole lot of the people who were involved. I'm not going to go through here and say all their names because I might forget some, and I don't want anybody to feel bad. A project like this is all volunteers. And that's an amazing thing to get this much of a thing done with volunteers. So I thank all of them. You know who you are. We'll get that later. Okay, those of you who are watching, I hope you're deciding that you're going to go to the fire tower if you've never been there. So I've got this partial map. You should go to the park office and get a better map that has more territory showing. But this one shows Long Pond, and that's kind of what I thought would be a reference point. You can drive in past Long Pond on Long Pond Road, this black line, and it comes all the way up to a parking lot with a restroom and a kiosk that tells you where to go to get further on up and go to the tower. The tower road goes through private land in a short distance. So when you go up there and walk, you want to be respectful and stay on the road. Then along the road, there are storybook posts that were largely the work of Dorothy Surprise. And I can't see his name right now. That's okay. He knows who he is. He was president of the Friends of Grafton. He and Dorothy got a grant, and they made all these storybook things and made them permanent. So as you go up to the tower, you'll pass these permanent little placards that show you the story of the tower and Helen Ellett. So you want to go on up through there and do that hike. I advise you wear sturdy shoes or good sneakers. There'll be some muddy places, and there's a outcropping of rock. You got to wrestle your way up about 20 feet. Nothing serious, but you don't want to go up here and think you're going to see the fire tower in your flip-flops. Don't do that. Here's the sunrise from the tower. Looking to the east, photo by Nate Sims. All of these photos were by Nate. Nate, I hope you're on tonight. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Without Nate's photographs like this to inspire people to be interested in conserving the tower, we probably would never have gotten this done. So thank you, Nate. And this is a 5 a.m. of like sunrise. There's the east over there, the sun coming up over in Vermont. So if you had a blow up, you can see the Battle of Bennington Monument is sticking up down in there. So that's where this is. Thank you, Nate. This has inspired so many people to see, and that's what I wanted to leave with all of you. If you think you need to pick me up or you're having some problems of thinking about good deeds or good thoughts, take a walk up to the fire tower. It will change your life, at least a little bit. If you want to volunteer, anything like this continues to need volunteers. You can contact Greg Hallworth. He's taken over as president of the Friends of Grafton. Thank you, Greg. And there's his email, rideallday29@gmail.com. Greg's the real deal on that ride all day. I talked to him a year ago because he comes over to our farm quite a bit. Oh, he says, I'm going to do a 200-mile ride tomorrow. Holy God almighty. He's the real deal. And he's got a heart of gold. If you want to be a volunteer and be part of something good, hook up with these guys and help Grafton become a better and better place. And that's it.
Wow. Thanks so much, Dick.
You're welcome.
That was terrific. There's some love coming in the chat. And some questions. So I'll do the compliments first. Fantastic job, great discussion. Dick, this is such a great story. After having hiked to many of the Adirondack fire towers, it is so informative to now learn how you got this done. And that was Skip earlier. Paul and Bonita says, how wonderful all of this is. My mother, Irma Maxon, was the last fire tower watcher before it closed. My sister was about 3 or 4 years old, and my mother took her to the top each day when she had to work. We had many picnics at the cabin while my mom worked. So thankful that you have restored it.
It gives me great pleasure.
So now to a couple questions. Jeff would like to know how the X braces were fabricated.
David Vanna has the metalworking shop in the Adirondacks, and I would have to ask him all of the details, but he has a hot dipping tank for putting zinc galvanizing on everything. So he makes the frame, folds over the place, drills the hole, and gets it ready to go, then does a hot dip in his facility and coats everything with zinc. I'm sure there's a lot of things I don't know in his shop, because that's a tough one. I think he was trying to sell the business, at the last I heard, maybe 6-8 months ago. So, but we can find out from David. If you go up to Grafton Lake Park and go to the office, you'll see a little short stubby fire tower. David Vanna made that fire tower, came over and installed it as part of the park for little kids, although it's fun to go up in it even if you're an adult. So we can find out more about how he did all of that, but that's about all I got.
Thanks. Robin asks, do you know when the fire tower closed before restoration?
No, we'd probably have to ask the gentleman who said that. I'm thinking in the late 50s, middle 50s, but that's a guess. We could find out. We can try to find out.
How long do you think the fire tower will last now with all of the galvanized steel and the new nuts and bolts? Is this going to last forever?
It's an important thing to note that this year, 1924, is the 100th year anniversary of this tower being installed. So that tower stood there 100 years. It needed work, but I suspect that what we've done to it will make it last mostly of another 100 years. But there's always maintenance that boards do rot, and there's things that need to be done on the ground. So the need for a solid volunteer group doesn't go away just because we got it restored. I was happy to hear through the park office or through the Friends of Grafton that this summer, for the first time, there will be a park steward stationed at the tower to guide people and help people enjoy the tower. So we're making progress on that front. There will be maintenance. You can bet on it.
Oh, that's
good for
great.
another 100 years.
Excellent. How many weekends did you spend in those 2 years? It looked like 2 years of actively working as a group. I mean, was this like every weekend, one weekend a month?
It was give all, you know. So if there was something to do at the fire tower, that would take priority over taking care of our kids, who are probably on this talk tonight. And I love them dearly. They survived us doing this tower. So in amongst fixing this tower, you have to remember that Sherry and I and Charlie and Joe Dalton were very serious, what you call recreational road bicyclists. Sherry and Charlie rode over 7,000 miles in 1 year. That's like 300 miles a week year round. We were nuts, but we loved bicycling. And that brought us together, Gary too. And I wouldn't exchange anything. We got her done and we had a lot of fun.
Amazing.
Anybody else?
No questions, but there's some, I don't know if you can see the chats, but Maureen says that many memories at the fire tower with her mother and family. She loved working there. This is Maureen Maxon.
Oh, great.
My mother was still working there in 1970 or close to that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Great to know that some of your and my cycling friends were involved in the restoration. Skip says that. He never knew that they were involved.
Thanks, Skip. Yep, I know him.
Yeah, more thanks. And Annie says, what a wonderful talk, Dick.
Well, how much time do we have left before we're cut off?
Dan is in charge of that, so we won't be cut off. We'll be fine.
I'll tell you when I first got to go to the fire tower. Sherry and I got married in 1966. We had zero money. I was going to enter RPI. Sharon was going to be a teacher in Cohoes. Pay wasn't going to come for a month. So we used our U-Haul, said goodbye to our relatives and our wedding, and drove to Troy. At that time, Troy didn't even have street signs, so you couldn't tell which street was which. It was amazing to us from the Midwest. And we didn't have any money, and I didn't know where to work. We didn't have a telephone. So I found a newspaper that said day laborers down at Chuck Rose Chicken Factory on River Street in Troy. I didn't care what I did. I'd taken care of chickens on the farm. I had pigs, chickens, and cows. So I went down to Chuck Rose Chicken Factory, and there were a whole bunch of day laborers waiting to go in. I went in, and they handed me different jobs to do. 25,000 chickens in a frame truck coming in. The chickens were to be processed, and the meat was to go to Campbell Soup back out in Buffalo or something. I pulled 25,000 chickens off the truck and hung them on the assembly line with them flapping and scratching and pooping and everything. Doesn't matter. I came home that night and Sharon made chicken dinner. I couldn't eat it. A couple days later, I found a scrap of paper and somebody was hiring for $2. I was getting $1.37 an hour. I could get $2 an hour and work on a crew that was rolling up copper wire starting in North Troy. And I worked on that crew and we went through the woods and rolled up copper. It was the Vietnam War era. And we rolled up copper wire all the way up into Grafton. At lunchtime, those guys on the crew knew where the fire tower was. I just had a sandwich I brought, and they drove me to the fire tower. That was my first visit to the fire tower. And that was the colonel that kept me going on this all those years. 40 years since I took the picture of the bicycles laying on the ground. Man, it's been a long time, but it's so rewarding. And anybody who's on here, you ought to get up there. It's wonderful. It'll do something for you. Thank you.
What a great story. And David says he always knew that you were awesome, but you are even more awesome than he ever knew. Ditto that. What's awesome.
Thank you, all of you, for attending. It means a lot to me that you came. And you know, the love of nature grows as you get older. And it's good for the little kids to get started. So get your kids, get some good shoes on them, hike them up there. They'll be different when they come down.
I agree. Thanks so much, Dick. I'm going to put a plug in here. Dick showed a picture of the Tom Hannock Reservoir, I think from the tower, or
Yeah.
at least in that area. Yeah. So there's a cleanup on Saturday from 9 to 12. That's something that Rensselaer Land Trust had done traditionally, and we are now merged with the Land Trust. And so that tradition is continuing. If you're interested, please look on our website for more information about that. And then our next speaker, which will be the final one for this season, will start up again in the fall, will be on May 16th. That will be maple sugaring in Postenkill at 7 o'clock. So we all hope that you can join us then. And Dick, I'll just read some more thanks. That you're inspirational, great job, gave us some good laughs, great presentation and stories. And thanks again. We really, really appreciate this.
Thanks, everybody. It was fun on my part.
Have a good night, everyone. See you next time. Thanks for joining.